So I'm just going to get my mask off here. All right. Now that I can see, and you could probably hear me a little bit better, we're going to start off. I want to thank everyone who's come out tonight. It's a rather rainy night before Halloween, little bit damp, but it'll do. So, I want to also thank our people who have been joining us online in our online chat. I do actually have you guys up on my mobile device here. So, to get us all started, a couple notes for the people here. I notice a couple of you are still wandering in. If you guys need to use the bathroom, that is the porta potty to my right, your left. After the presentation, after we've done question and answers, I actually will be over running the sales desk. It's a little gift shop, and all the proceeds do go to keeping our lights on and allows us to keep offering the free public programs. I want to thank everyone. We are a nonprofit, so I also want to thank everyone who's this season has been hugely generous. We have our wall of stars for people who have donated above the $25 mark or made purchases above that. And like I said, just having people come up, even though we are still on the reservation system, has been huge. Right. With that, a couple other things. We are live streaming this, so you can check us out on our YouTube. That's why we are all mic'd up, especially with COVID. We've made a couple changes. Angry car is angry. But like I said, we have our YouTube channel, so check us out there. And if you don't happen to, if you can't see us in person live, you can join us there. And if you miss it, you can still see it later because we do have that as an archive of our past broadcasts. So, how you also get us is through our website, uacnj.org. And that's where you'll find a list of all our member clubs, and as well as many of the the telescopes we have, the technical experiments we have going on with a couple of the colleges around. And with that, we're going to get into tonight's program. So, tonight's program is Things That Go Bump in the Night Sky. It was supposed to be with Sean and Sebastien, but I believe Sebastien decided trick-or-treating sounded a lot more fun. All right.
It's a good thing you have that bowl in there.
So, Sean was born 15 minutes before Apollo 11 lifted off to take a man to land on the moon. He came in with a love of space and science built in. He also has an uncanny way of bringing clouds to Jenny Jump every single time.
Every time.
And we haven't broken the streak tonight either. So now he shares his love of space and science with his son, Sebastien, who, like I said, unfortunately decided trick-or-treating was slightly more interesting. Again, don't blame him. And with that, here's Sean.
All right, thanks, Kim. As I send the microphone flying.
We take you now to the Meridian Room in the Hotel Park Plaza in downtown New York, where you will be entertained by the music of Raymond Raquello and his orchestra.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Meridian Room in the Park Plaza Hotel in New York City, we bring you the music of Raymond Raquello and his orchestra. With a touch of the Spanish, Raymond Raquello leads off with La Comparsita. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving toward the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Raquello, playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Park Plaza Hotel, situated in downtown New York.
All right. Did I hit the right button? Am I on? Okay, cool. So thanks for coming out tonight. In case anyone was not aware, that is a recording of the broadcast of War of the Worlds, which happened October 30th, 1938, and featured New Jersey pretty prominently. It caused a huge panic the night of the broadcast because people didn't realize that they were listening to a play. It was that well done. And because of that, the FCC has rules about station identification and identifying that what you're listening to is not real. Sometimes people listen to that. So why are we afraid of the dark? Nyctophobia is the fear of the dark. It causes intense symptoms of anxiety and depression. Being afraid of the dark is normal for human development, though. It starts when you're a kid. And studies focused on the phobia have shown that humans often fear the dark because it's a lack of visual stimuli. So 80% of what our brain takes in is visual. And when you take that 80% away, well, the human imagination has been our greatest strength, and it also has a couple of drawbacks. When there's no input to process, the brain makes it up itself. And when the brain makes it up itself, it's a lot worse than what reality usually is. That's why good horror movies, they hardly ever show you the monster. And if they do, it's just fleeting glimpses or very, very late into the production, because your brain is going to do a much better job of creating that monster than they could ever do. Darkness has only really been a choice in the last 150 years or so. Now we have lights. Light pollution is the bane of our existence up here. And people have access to light, but that's just until recently, very, very, very recently in human evolution. And back in the days of caveman, when it got dark out and you couldn't see anything, that's when all the predators were out. And it was very easy to get yourself taken out by something that was just much better in the night than you were. So people just developed that fear and that anxiety of being afraid of the dark and wanting to stay near light. And archaeologists, they really hadn't studied it. I was looking for information and some source material for this, and the archaeologists really haven't studied too much of the night sky up until recently. This is Dr.
If you
Nancy
think
Gonlin,
of
from
tourists,
a TEDx
they
talk
typically
she did.
visit sites during the day. And archaeologists typically excavate sites during the day. And all of that allows us to envision what it's like to live during the day in the past. We typically do not experience archaeological sites at night. So we typically do not think about what ancient people did at night either. This imbalance is analogous to archaeologists including only men in their reconstructions of the past and no other genders. What about everybody else? The archaeology of the night is essential to provide balance and perspective to our reconstructions of the past. But this idea is a radical one because it previously has not been done in archaeology before. I have spent a good deal of my professional life researching the everyday lives of the common people who lived in ancient Maya societies of Central America and Mexico. They left behind a remarkable record of their lifeway. They built grand temple pyramids and palaces and ball courts, monuments and altars, and thousands of houses in their cities in the tropics during the time period that we archaeologists refer to as the Classic. The Classic period is dated from about AD 250 to 900. Until now, our reconstructions of the Classic Maya have favored the day. So, how did the Classic Maya experience the night, and how do we as archaeologists know? Artifacts and architecture will tell us, as well as art and the ancient writings of the Maya themselves and their descendants. The Classic Maya simultaneously feared and revered the night. Their nightscape was full of tropical, fantastical beings, real and imagined, where jaguars roamed and fantastical beings populated the dark. Darkness was not just the absence of light, but represented the time before creation. The night was wild and untamed. The Classic Maya are well known to have been expert astronomers. Today, the field of cultural astronomy attests well to their sophistication in such matters. What happened in the night sky did not just stay in the night sky, for there were dire consequences on this earth. Seeing the stars, the planets, the constellations, the Milky Way, the moon, one could tell whether it was time to plant crops or wage war, for it was written in the stars. Like us, most of the Classic Maya would have spent most of their nights at home, so we need to examine the remains of their houses. This focus is called household archaeology. The factors of age and gender and class affected one's housing, but also one's experience of the night. Your time spent at home at night was moderated by whether you were a child or an adult, a man or a woman, a commoner or a noble, for there was inequality in the ancient night. The privileged few spent their nights in grand palaces built of stone that securely kept them tucked away from the dangers of the dark and offered a reprieve from the public. Once inside, they could safely light indoor fires contained in ceramic vessels that warded off the dampness of the dark and any beings that roamed around. The nobles reclined on built-in benches made more comfortable for them with finely woven cloth and curtains for privacy. The Classic Maya also wrote about the night. They ritualized the night and they sanctified the night. A precious offering of blood was made by Lady Shuk, Queen of Yaxchilan. Her husband, King Itzamna Balam III, assisted her by wielding a large, heavy torch that illuminated the darkness. On the evening of this performance on Sunday, October 24th, AD 709, the waxing moon was 90% illuminated, lending additional brightness to this act of devotion. The Classic Maya also celebrated the night, and one way to do that is with chocolate. They recorded the ceremony of King An-Ak II, ruler of Piedras Negras and a member of the Turtle Dynasty. In AD 749, this turtle lord celebrated the 20th anniversary of his reign by dancing at midnight and imbibing a hot, inebriating chocolate drink. What about the commoners? How did they experience the night? Their residences were far more common on the landscape, but they were constructed of perishable materials, like the one featured in this photograph. The commoners are the ones who built the temples where the royal people worshipped and buried their dead. The commoners are the ones who built the palaces where the rich lived. The commoners are the ones who built everything else in their society and nourished the nobles with the food that they grew. There is no writing to tell us about this, however, nor whether these activities occurred during the day or the night. However, this constraint should not limit us. Evidence for ancient nights has always been there, but our perception of it has not. We can use everyday artifacts and features to tell us about the night. A hearth during the day is essential for cooking, but at night, it's transformed for socializing and warmth. The earthen floor of a humble house was a work platform by day, but at night, bringing out the sleeping mats, it became a place for sleep. We can also use the present to tell us about the past. I'm thinking of the numerous studies that anthropologists have conducted on contemporary Maya agriculturalists. And if you know anything about farming, a farmer's work is never done, day or night. There are tasks to be accomplished. We can envision classic Maya women involved in the laborious process of preparing maize and beans for the next day's meals and settling in infants and children for the night. Likewise, men would have been involved in provisioning the household. Perhaps they were in the milpas, the cornfields, but darkness was ideal for deer hunting. Once performing the appropriate rituals to ensure their success, men would set out on the hunt. The moon goddess, astride her deer, watched over them.
So I let that play a little bit long because she says it a lot better than I could, and I just say exactly what she said anyway. So cutting out the middleman or middlewoman, as the case may be. So commonly, everyone remembers there's 5 senses, although child development people will tell you there's 7, and some will tell you there's 20. It depends who you want to listen to. But 7 actually makes sense. So we've got vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, the 5 that everyone knows. And evolutionarily, we are pattern recognizing monkeys. Our brains seek out patterns. That's how we survive. That's how we try not to get killed. We see patterns. And when there's not enough data, we still see patterns. We make them up. The man in the moon. Elvis and the toast. The 2 other senses, vestibular, which is movement and balance. And I'm going to butcher this, it's proprioception, which is your body position. And all of those work together. One of the examples I read was, think of a baseball player. You go up to the plate, you're looking around, you're seeing what's there, you see the pitcher, you see the situation around you, you hear the crowd, you probably smell all sorts of athletic smells that aren't too pleasant. The touch, the feel of the bat in your hands, and you get in there, you take your batting stance, and that is your sense of movement and balance. And you see the ball coming in, and your body position sense tells you when to swing. And then your sense of touch and your sense of hearing will tell you if you hit the ball or not. So 7 senses. But vision is the most important of them.
Ladies and gentlemen, following on the news given in our bulletin a moment ago, the Government Meteorological Bureau has requested the large observatories of the country to keep an astronomical watch on any further disturbances occurring on the planet Mars. Due to the unusual nature of this occurrence, we have arranged an interview with the noted astronomer, Professor Pearson, who will give us his views on this event. In a few moments, we will take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, New Jersey. We return you until then to the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra.
So one of the big things for things going bump in the night sky are comets, the harbingers of doom, the menace of the universe, the omens of disaster, and the messengers of the gods. all different ways that comets have been described through history, and how they've been written down and drawn and depicted before we take great pictures of them. This is from the Cometographia from 1668, depicting 7 different types of comets that had been observed. So the sky is predictable. We know when the sun's coming up, we know when the sun's coming down, we know where the planets are supposed to be, we know what stars are supposed to come up and down. All that stuff is tracked. You use that information as a society as far back as 6,000 years ago to know when to plant, to know when to harvest, to know when to go to war, when the Nile's going to flood. All those things are all tracked. Comets, though, were erratic and unpredictable, and they're often the most spectacular sight in the night sky. And this led people in many cultures to believe that the gods dictated their motion and were sending them as a message. What were the gods trying to say? Some cultures read the message by images that they saw upon looking at the comet. For example, to some cultures, the tail of the comet gave it the appearance of the head of a woman, the long flowing hair behind her. The sorrowful symbol of mourning was understood to mean that the gods had sent the comet to Earth because they were displeased. And others thought that the elongated comet looked like a fiery sword, and that meant it was time for war. We're just going to skip through that because it's going to get long. So in more classical civilizations, the Roman Sibylline oracles put down they observed the comet as a great conflagration from the sky falling to the earth. The Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh had comets bringing fire, brimstone, and floods. The Yakut legend from Mongolia called comets the daughter of the devil, warning of destruction and storms when she approached. And the Chinese called them broom stars or vile stars or long-tailed pheasant stars. But rather than just be afraid, the Chinese kept meticulous records of when comets appeared in the sky. And these records were preserved. And once modern scientists in at the time of Newton and the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, they were able to read those records, and that helped them out. They were able to use those records to determine that it's not all different comets. Some of them were repeaters. They were in orbit, and they were able to use that information to calculate the orbits. But comets weren't just for the ancients. In Switzerland, Halley's Comet was blamed for earthquakes. Romans recorded that there was a comet marking the assassination of Julius Caesar. England held Halley's Comet responsible for the Black Death. Incans recorded a comet just days before the arrival of the conquistador Pizarro. That one was pretty accurate. Pope Calixtus III excommunicated Halley's Comet as an instrument of the devil. And it's not all bad, though. A meteorite from a comet is one of the most venerated objects in Islam. One of the most famous depictions of a comet is from the Bayeux Tapestry. This is sections 32 and 33. It's from the year, well, it's from after 1066, but it was depicting the entire time of the Norman conquest of Britain. Halley's Comet, well, it wasn't Halley's Comet back then. It was just a big old comet in the sky. Showed up in April 1066, and you could see it from all over Europe. King Harold of England saw it as an omen of invasion, and William the Conqueror saw it as predicting success for his invasion. They both got it right. So that's all the ancient people, right? That stuff doesn't happen now. 1910, Halley's Comet makes its first predicted return since 1834. Scientists are all over this. They know exactly where it's going to be, when it's going to be, how it's going to be. They've done the math. It's great. It's only going to be a little over 14 million miles away. Earth might actually pass through the tail. And making things a little more complicated was that just previously to Halley's Comet was Comet Morehouse, and spectroscopes were used, and they discovered cyanogen gas. Not something you want to be a part of. Not good to breathe. But they discovered that it was in Comet Morehouse's tail. So, anxiety grips parts of the world as a ball of toxic gas races towards the Earth at 120,000 miles an hour. Faced with mounting fear, the French call on their most famous astronomer, their Neil deGrasse Tyson of the day, Camille Flammarion, to speak to the public. And he speaks to the public. He's well received. He talks about all the different possibilities of what could happen, from nothing happening to just a spectacular show, to the possibility, maybe really, really rare, probably not going to happen, extinction of life on Earth from the bad gas. Well, the press, you'd think fake news and cherry-picking stories is a 21st century thing. Now, the press, they picked up the worst predictions, and they forgot to mention that those predictions were extremely unlikely. So throwing gas on the fire, now we've got, in February of 1910, spectroscopic observations at the Yerkes Observatory confirm that there is cyanogen gas in Halley's tail. Scientists conclude, though, that the gas will decompose in the upper atmosphere and not pose a threat. The press, they forgot that part. Some people sell all their possessions. It's the end of the world coming. We're all going to die. Some people caulk their windows thinking, well, that's going to help keep the gas out. Some take refuge in churches. And as Halley got closer and closer, several tens of thousands of people gathered in St. Peter's Square in Rome. So in Paris, Air Liquide, a company, took atmospheric samples as the event occurred, and they found no toxic gas. Everything was good. People were panicking over nothing. Turns out that the Earth missed the tail by about 250,000 miles. When they were doing their calculations, the scientists and the mathematicians got it wrong. They fudged some numbers, they rounded when they shouldn't have, and 250,000 miles, still pretty close. It's about the distance from the Earth to the Moon.
We take you now to Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Carl Phillips again, out at the Wilmot Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey. Professor Pearson and myself made the 11 miles from Princeton in 10 minutes. Well, I hardly know where to begin. Paint for you a word picture of a strange scene before my eyes, but nothing out of a modern Arabian Night. Well, I just got here. I haven't had a chance to look around yet. I guess that's it. Yes, I guess that's the thing directly in front of me, half buried in a vast pit. Must have struck with terrific force. The ground is covered with splinters of a tree. It must have struck on its way down. But I can see the object itself doesn't look very much like a meteor. At least not the meteors I've seen. It looks more like a huge cylinder. Has a diameter of, what would you say, Professor Pearson?
What's that?
What would you say, what's the diameter of this?
About 30 yards.
About 30 yards. The metal on the sheath is, well, I've never seen anything like it. The color is sort of yellowish white. Its curious spectators now are pressing close to the object in spite of the efforts of the police to keep them back. Getting in front of my line of vision. Would you mind standing one side, please? While the police pushing the crowd back. Here's Mr. Wilmot, owner of the farm here. He may have some interesting facts to add. Mr. Wilmot, would you please tell the radio audience as much as you remember of this rather unusual visitor that dropped in your backyard? Step closer, please. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Wilmot.
Well, I was listening to the radio.
Closer and louder, please.
Pardon me?
Louder, please, closer.
Yes. I was listening to the radio and kind of drowsing. That professor fellow was talking about Mars, so I was half dozing, half...
Yes, Mr. Wilmot, and then what happened?
Well, as I was saying, I was listening to the radio, kind of halfway.
Yes, Mr. Wilmot, and then you saw something.
Well, not first off. I heard something.
And what did you hear?
A hissing sound like this. Kind of like a 4th of July rocket.
Yes, then what?
I turned my head out the window and would have sworn I was asleep and dreaming.
Yes?
I seen a kind of greenish streak and then zingo. Something smacked the ground, knocked me clear out of my chair.
Well, were you frightened, Mr. Wilmot?
Well, I ain't quite sure. I reckon I was kind of riled.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wilmot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you want me to
No,
tell
that's
some
quite
more?
all right. That's plenty. Ladies.
All right, so now we're going to get up to modern times because modern people, our generation, my generation, I lived through this one. We certainly never do anything silly because of a comet being in the sky. We've got science now. Well, Hale-Bopp, the great comet of 1997, was discovered in July 1995, and it was closest to Earth in March of 1997, and it was absolutely spectacular. Scientists estimated that the nucleus was about 50 kilometers in diameter, which is about 3 times the size of Halley's Comet. But now, in the 90s, we've got intranet. An astronomer takes an image of Hale-Bopp in November of 1996. It shows a fuzzy, elongated object trailing the comet. And it can't be identified as a star. They don't know what it is. So he shares that image with overnight radio host Art Bell. And the crazies take over. It's got to be a spaceship. What else could it be if it's not a star and it's trailing the comet? And you probably remember the Heaven's Gate cult, a mass suicide because they wanted to hitch a ride on that spaceship. But it turns out that that was really just a star, an 8.5 magnitude star that didn't show up in the photographer's software because the user preferences weren't set to show it. And Hale-Bopp will be back in 4380. Who's going to be around for it? So now we're going to move on to lunar eclipses. This is a time lapse that was taken of a lunar eclipse. The moon turns red during a lunar eclipse due to the sunlight being refracted by the Earth's atmosphere. And in this video, the moon goes dark for a couple seconds. It doesn't actually go dark when you're looking at it. That's just because the camera has to adjust to the light levels rapidly changing. So a lunar eclipse occurs. It can occur every full moon when the Earth and the sun and the moon are lined up. The Earth gets between the moon and the sun, and it blocks out the light. They can happen twice a year as the moon is going through its slightly offset orbit from our plane of rotation. So there are times when it's too high, there are times when it's too low. And it's just sees the sun just fine. And we just see a normal full moon. But when it lines up just right, you can get a moon that turns blood red. And it is really, really cool to see. I've seen a few of them. We've seen a few of them from up here before. And just like that, it's over. So let's talk about some famous lunar eclipses in history. January 29th, 1137 BC is the first documentation of a lunar eclipse, and that's from a Zhou Dynasty book. And the Chinese kept meticulous records of everything that happened in the sky. In August 28th, 413 BC, the Second Battle of Syracuse. The Athenians were done. They were planning on going home, loading up their boats. They had 86 boats, taking everybody home. And there's a lunar eclipse, and the priests say, nah, let's hold off a month. Let's not go. That's a bad sign. So they hold off for a month. And the Syracusans completely wreck them. 86 Athenian ships sunk or beached, and their leader killed because they were superstitious over a lunar eclipse. May 22nd, 1453 AD, a partial lunar eclipse is seen during the fall of Constantinople. the siege was going on before that, it ended about a week later. But probably the most famous story around a lunar eclipse comes from Christopher Columbus. In June 1503, Columbus and his crew are stranded in Jamaica. The natives welcome him and his crew, and they feed him. It's great. But Columbus and the crew cheat and steal from the locals. Not a good thing. And after 6 months, they get fed up and they stop feeding the Columbus and his crew. Now, Columbus had a copy of the Regiomontanus, which was an almanac that had lunar eclipses predicted. And by coincidence, because the plot demanded it, there was a lunar eclipse that would be visible from Jamaica at moonrise just a few days away from where they were. So Columbus requests a meeting with the local leader during the daytime, just before the eclipse is set to start. And he tells them on March 1st, 1504, he meets the leaders, and he tells them that his god would make a sign of the rising full moon to indicate his displeasure with his crew not being fed. And the eclipse happens at moonrise, exactly as predicted. Columbus's son Ferdinand wrote, "The people, with great howling and lamentation, came running from every direction laden with provisions, praying to Columbus to intercede on their behalf." Now, he'd been timing the eclipse with an hourglass, so he knew exactly when it was going to end. And just a few minutes before it was supposed to end, he stands up and announces that God has forgiven you. We're good. And the eclipse ends. Great story. That literary device has been used several times. It was used in King Solomon's Mines, where Alan Quatermain pulls a similar stunt. Mark Twain used it in A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, where the character remembers that there's an eclipse and predicts it and gets his freedom that way. And it's been used a bunch of other times. Knowledge of the sky is power. So now we're going to look at solar eclipses, not in the night sky, but they do turn the day sky
On
to
August
night.
21st, the moon's shadow
This is
shoot
from,
across North America, going
a couple
more
years ago,
than
right before the big
1,000
eclipse
miles per
that
hour.
went across America.
Everyone in this area will get a chance to see the sun at least partially covered by the moon. And along the path of totality, birds will go silent, temperature will drop, the wind will shift direction, and stars will come out as the sun's light is momentarily extinguished. But eclipses are more than just natural marvels. Over the centuries, they've spurred major discoveries about the universe. The oldest surviving record of an eclipse comes from Yin, an ancient capital city in China. It was carved on a tortoise shell. 3 flames ate the sun, and big stars were seen. A lot of ancient stories, from the Americas to Scandinavia to India, refer to the sun being eaten. People thought some deity was angry, or these were omens that meant a king would die. And some of those kings were nervous enough, they appointed people to study the sky and take lots of notes. What started out as fearful fascination turned into something more scientific. Freaking out about eclipses kick-started astronomy. One of these early astronomers, Hipparchus, used an eclipse to calculate the distance to the moon. There was a total eclipse in his hometown, but he heard that 600 miles due south, only 4/5 of the sun was obscured. That was all he needed. See, Hipparchus was all about this new kind of math involving lots of angles and triangles. He calculated that the moon was between this far away and this far away. This was hundreds of years before telescopes, and we'd already started to measure the solar system. By the 17th century, the moon's size and distance were well known, but no one knew why the moon orbited Earth. Then a real oddball named Isaac Newton figured out the law of gravity. But some people needed convincing. Newton's hype man, Edmund Halley, that guy they named a comet after, said, okay, Newton's law of gravity determines the moon's orbit, So I should be able to use that law to predict exactly when the moon will go in front of the sun. He calculated that an eclipse would hit Britain at 9:05 a.m. on May 3rd, 1715. And he printed up these handy posters that reassured everyone, no, the king isn't going to die. Halley got impressively close. The sun went dark at 9 sharp. And that eclipse proved Newton wasn't crazy, he was a genius. People went on to use Newton's ideas to accurately predict the orbits of most of the known planets. But 2 planets had unexpected wobbles, Uranus and Mercury. In France, tireless mathematician Urbain Le Verrier used lots of equations to show that it must be the gravity of unknown planets pulling Uranus and Mercury off track. He calculated exactly where the planet pulling on Uranus would have to be. And when astronomers went to look, there it was. They named it Neptune. Le Verrier was psyched. He was so sure they'd find a planet pulling on Mercury too, he preemptively named it Vulcan. But here's the problem. Vulcan was supposed to be right here, just hidden by the sun's glare. Vulcan hunters would need an eclipse. Every time one rolled around, scientists, including Thomas Edison, scoured the sky. But those eclipses never revealed Vulcan. It just wasn't there. Mercury's wobbly orbit remained a mystery until Albert Einstein came along. Einstein had this radical new theory, the general theory of relativity, and it made Vulcan unnecessary. According to the theory, Mercury was thrown off course because the sun's bulk was warping the very fabric of space-time. Einstein's equations predicted the wobbly orbit perfectly. But as always, some people demanded more proof. And once again, an eclipse came in useful. In 1919, the darkened skies allowed scientists to see stars near the sun. And just as Einstein predicted, the sun's huge mass nudged the starlight off course. Those results made him an instant celebrity. During a solar eclipse, you can see the sun's fiery atmosphere. Here's the reddish chromosphere. In 1868, scientists studying the light of the chromosphere found evidence of an unknown element. They named it helium, after the Greek sun god Helios. It took another 27 years before someone discovered helium on Earth. Where the chromosphere ends, the feathery corona begins. It sends blasts of charged particles into the solar system, and these space storms can take out electronics on Earth. They could even potentially kill interplanetary astronauts. So, how does the corona work? Well, there's a lot we still don't know, partly because we can really only investigate it when something blocks the overpowering brilliance of the sun's disk. We've built advanced instruments to try and do that, but the moon still does the job much, much better. That's why, even after all these years, scientists still flock to eclipses, point their gadgets at the sky, and make the most of that brief moment in the moon's shadow to shed new light on the sun.
So we have another eclipse coming, and it's just a couple years away. April 8th, 2024. It won't be total here in New Jersey. It'll be about 93%. It's going to come up through Mexico, over Texas, and then out through Canada. Around here, if you go to Cleveland or Niagara Falls or up by Plattsburgh, you'll be able to see it in totality, which is a lot closer than last time. I ended up going to Wyoming for it. Lots of people went to Illinois or South Carolina. But it was great to actually see one up close. And I plan on traveling to go see the next one. So there's other things that go bump in the night sky. One of the more common ones is meteors. Meteoroids.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill.
Yes, we're unable to continue. Meteoroids, the smallest members of the solar system. Sizes range from about a small pebble down to a grain of sand. Most of them are leftovers from comet tails. And when a meteoroid hits the atmosphere, it becomes a meteor, a big streak of light in the sky. Some bigger than others. Some you can miss if you blink. We've got some videos that have been taken by the camera here of some nice fireballs. Meteor showers appear to come from the same point in the sky, so they're named for the constellation where it looks like they're coming from. And if a meteor makes it all the way to the ground before it burns up, it becomes a meteorite. Now, we talked about one meteorite before. We'll talk about another one in a couple seconds. But there are some meteor showers. There's one going on right now. It's kind of winding down. But, you know, we've got clouds, so we're not seeing them. But there are some other ones coming up, some minor ones, and then towards the end of the year, some major ones. And there are plenty of websites that you can go take a look at that'll give you the details of where to look and when. All right. Anyone know what that is? It's a knife. It's not a knife. That is King Tut's meteorite dagger. It was discovered in 1925 when his tomb was discovered. It was made in the 14th century BC, and the blade composition is 88% iron, 11% nickel, and a little under 1% of cobalt. Now, ancient iron artifacts from that period of time never exceed 4% nickel. So the iron-nickel ratio for that blade is dead center in the group of 76 discovered iron meteorites. So they're pretty sure that that blade was forged from iron that came from a meteor. Iron smelting was rare. Iron at that point was more valuable than gold. There's no evidence of iron smelting in Egypt until the 6th century BC. And so the scientists presume that that meteor knife was actually given to him as a gift by a foreign country. And it's not the only one. There are dozens of artifacts that have been found to have been made from meteorites. Necklaces, the beads are iron from meteorites, a bunch of knives, all sorts of small things that you can make from the iron that comes from a meteorite. And we're coming up to the end now. We're getting in towards today. We'll talk about space junk, space stations, and satellites.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been handed a message that came in from Grover's Mill by telephone. Just one moment, please.
So the Space Surveillance Network currently tracks over 27,000 pieces of debris larger than a softball. There are an estimated 500,000 pieces of untracked debris between the size of a marble and a softball, and an estimated 100 million pieces of debris at least 1 millimeter in size. So we've done a good job of trashing space. All those little pieces move at 17,500 miles an hour, and they can do damage. There are jobs specifically created at NASA where their job is to track the junk that might come near the space station so that they can plan for that, especially during spacewalks. You don't want to be outside and have your spacesuit hit by a micrometeoroid. They do checks. If you've ever watched any of the live streams from NASA when they have spacewalks going on, they're out there 6 to 8 hours, and they're constantly doing checks to see if they've been hit by anything. We're too late in the night tonight, and it's cloudy anyways, so we would not see the space station if it passed over. There's a website called Heavens Above that you can use. It'll tell you when either the ISS or the Tiangong Chinese space station will be passing overhead and be visible. You can't miss it when it flies overhead. It's one of the brightest things in the sky, and it cruises right along. It's only up there for a couple of minutes before it disappears. You can see the space station because it's high enough in altitude that before sunrise or after sunset, it's in sunlight while we're still dark and our sky is still dark. So you can't see it during the day, even if it flies right overhead, because it's just not bright enough. And you can't see it in the middle of the night because it's in the Earth's shadow. So we have several passes. There was one this morning where it did not get very high in the sky. The best chance to see it is going to be November 7th, when it'll get up about 34 degrees in the sky. But you can check. It cycles through. There's times where you can see it for several nights in a row or several mornings in a row. And then there's times where it's just not in the right spot and we won't see it for a couple of weeks. Same thing for the Chinese station, and it looks the same. You can try to watch it through binoculars. You can see the makeup of the station. You can see the solar panels, especially if it passes in front of the moon or anything a little bit big. You can make out the silhouette. So now, space junk. They track space junk, and you can actually see it sometimes at night when it's flying overhead. So this chart is a mixture of actual satellites, the things that we want up there doing things, and the garbage that's left over from getting them up there. And they're usually not as bright. They look like dim stars, and they move across the sky. When I'm not here, and it's not cloudy, we've had nights where you've seen a dozen satellites going across the sky. Some will go straight overhead. A lot of them are in polar orbits, so they'll just come straight north to straight south, or straight south to straight north, which gives us a great chance to see them up here, unless I'm here. And again, you can get this from Heavens Above. And up until just before I left to come up here, we were going to get a chance to see some live space, not junk. It was a launch that was scheduled for tonight, but it's been pushed back. The Crew Dragon 3 launch got pushed back to November 3rd now. So it was scheduled to go about 1 o'clock this morning, between 1 and 2. But not anymore. It got pushed back. But you'll be able to see it about 1 in the morning on the 3rd, if you want to be up that early. So, modern monsters. We're modern people. We got science. We know all this stuff. Right? It doesn't happen now. There's not going to be any panic over UFOs. But that's the 40s and the 50s. We were different back then. It doesn't happen now. It just happened a couple months ago. So people see lights in the sky that they can't explain. That's an unidentified flying object. Most of them can be explained. But because we've evolved now and we've got light, we don't have to worry about the darkness. We don't have to worry about monsters. We're the top of the food chain with our technology. There's nothing to scare us now. We know everything except what happened in the past. So that's led to our brains being able to fill in some of that missing information with the aliens. I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was the aliens. They're the ones that put that theory out there for us. So I've been playing some clips of War of the Worlds. You can get that online if you want to listen to it. It is the anniversary of the broadcast tonight. So Kim, are there any questions from out there in the wild?
Right. First off, I want to thank you, Sean, for a great presentation. I want to thank you guys for watching. So this is when we normally do our question and answer session. Just before we get into that, because I know a lot of people like to run away directly after the question section, and they don't get to hear a couple things, because I think a couple of you came in during the presentation after our starting notices. This is a live streamed show. We do post this on our YouTube, and I have been monitoring chat, and I've been keeping up with them when they have questions and whatnot. For those of you who are here, if you need the bathroom, again, it is the porta potty to my right, your left. I have the gift shop that I will be manning after we do the question and answer session. We do have one observatory open, and I use the term loosely. because the roof is closed. Normally, we would roll back the roof to allow the telescope to see the night sky. But as it is completely overcast and occasionally kind of damp, we have not rolled the roofs off to protect our equipment because we like being able to continue that, and telescope repair is not a cheap thing. On that note, we are a nonprofit, so all of your guys' donations through our website, through our sales desk, uh, through our new Patreon have gone to help us keeping our presentations free to the public and, pay the bills and keep up with all of that. So, with that, how I'm going to do it is kind of round robin. I'll do the first question from our online audience, and then for our audience here, if you have a question, raise your hand and wave it about because I have trouble seeing at night. All right, so the first question is, they see a flashing light. What is it? Well, it is Halloween, so I decided I would be
Not
fun
Stan, it was aliens.
and get these fun alien flashing light balloons. I don't know if you can see the face on stream now. I would take it down, but I am very short and I can't get it. I had my 6'5" boyfriend put it up for me. It was great. So with that, do we have a question from our in-person audience? And I'm going to take the microphone because chances are if you have the question, our online audience, oh, I'm stuck. Our online audience will also have the same question.
Hi. So you had something there about aliens. I was wondering if you know about the Fermi paradox and if you have any thoughts about it.
Trying to remember that one. I had looked. I had to cut out a lot of stuff because we barely snuck it in under an hour tonight. I could have probably gone for about 2 hours. Mine's going blank now on Fermi. But one of the things I did study was
Enrico Fermi, the physicist,
Yes.
once wondered where are all the aliens,
Right.
given all the
Yes.
billions and trillions of stars, and
Right.
where are they? They should be out there.
Right. So one of the things I did have planned for this that I had to cut out was the Drake equation, which comes to the conclusion of there are lots of stars. When you figure we've got one star in our solar system, and in our galaxy there are 300 billion stars, and there are billions and hundreds of billions of galaxies. So there are lots of stars. And then I read something else where they took a little bit of an exception to that, and they wanted to refine the Drake equation, where you had to look at the specific reasons for life developing on Earth, for intelligent, well, supposedly intelligent life developing on Earth. There's a lot of things that had to go right for life to develop. Our moon was a chance encounter. Without our moon, there probably wouldn't be life, not sentient life. Organic life, like bacteria, things like that, probably super common. Very easy for that to generate, they think. It could exist in our own solar system. They want to check out Triton, not Triton, Titan. The moon of Saturn has liquid methane lakes, and life could exist there. And under the ice, there is possibly an ocean under Europa's ice where life could exist there. It's liquid water. Liquid water is pretty much the only thing that is common to life. When they looked at Earth, they find places where life could not possibly exist, and yet there is microscopic life wherever they look. So, are there aliens out there? I would have to think so. Are they here? Probably not. They probably have never come here. Why would they? We haven't been that interesting a species for the longest time. It's hard to travel far distances. And if they have figured out how to travel those distances, why would they be interested in us? Would you be interested in looking at an anthill for more than a couple of seconds?
Yeah, oh, yes, the long car ride with the kid. Are we there yet?
Yes.
Are we there yet?
Yes. And they
I
get
need to
here,
pee.
They see us, and they're like, yeah. And if they do get here, interact with. Chances are it won't go well for us. Microphone is dying. If they do come here, if they've got the technology to cover the vast distances of space, they've probably got the technology to make us disappear in the blink of an eye. No upload viruses into their Macintosh system. No disabling their force fields.
No Independence Day heroics.
Nope. It would be over, and it'd be more like the Vogons from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Getting into position and boom, gone.
Well, at least it would be efficient.
Yes.
All right. So we had 2 questions online, and I'm actually going to pair them together. So they wanted to know how's the cloud cover and visibility, and if it's okay, are any observatories open? So, like I mentioned right after the talk, it is very cloudy. It's very unfortunately weatherly, and as such, we have the observatories fully open where the roof is rolled off, but I do believe Ken has his observatory at least with the door open, so you can see what an active observatory looks like inside if you were here. I'm guessing chances are they were going to ask about the proposed media hype surrounding the solar flare, allowing us to see the northern lights. And unfortunately, again, it is overcast, so there's absolutely 0 chance of seeing it. But even if there is, we should be looking at media hype posts like that about the solar flares with a critical eye. There is a number on a scientific scale that I can't remember.
Yeah, there's a website where you can look it up, and it'll tell you what they expect. And to see one in New Jersey, it's got to be a pretty strong flare. Chances are, if we see it pretty well in New Jersey, somebody's power is going out. There was one in 1859. Want something to be tonight or tomorrow? Carrington event.
Oh, hold on. There it is.
Okay. From 1859, a gigantic solar flare was documented, a huge coronal mass ejection, and it absolutely point blank nailed the Earth. Luckily, the only thing electronic back then was the telegraph system. Telegraph operators reported that even after the power was out for several hours, they could still send and receive messages because it was so energized. You could see the northern lights really, really well, like you were in Iceland, except now you're in Cuba. And when that happens, you are in for a really bad time if you've got any electronic devices. They are probably fried.
All right. Is there another question from our in-person audience? Oh, hold on. Let me look over.
So, when the clouds are not overhead, what's your favorite viewing with the telescopes?
My personal favorite are Jupiter and Saturn. And then those are favorites.
All right.
And Ken is here. The aliens brought him.
All right. Our next online question was, will UACNJ be open for the next big eclipse in the US? And we do not have any confirmation whether we will be open. I'm hoping we can, but we are a nonprofit and volunteer-based organization. So a lot of our programs depend on our being able to have volunteers show up. So last big eclipse, we were actually open, and we had volunteers, all 8 of them.
Yeah, we were all scattered across
There
the
were
country
about
to go see that.
over 300 people. Because this one's a little closer, we're hoping if we can open that we get a couple more volunteers because that was slightly overwhelming as someone who was there. But like I said, it really depends on being able to get the volunteers and weather, because just like everything else here with observing the night sky, it is very weather dependent. So, all right.
Yeah, and speaking of overwhelming, when I went to Wyoming, to a little town called Glendo, 100 miles north of Cheyenne, there were 150,000 people in a town that literally had one stoplight and a McDonald's and no gas station. Now, the town knew that they were going to be the epicenter for a lot of people, especially coming up from Denver and just from all over. So they made great plans. They really did a great job of having 18-wheeler truck trailers filled with porta potties. They had trucks full of ice. They had food vendors. They covered it and took care of 150,000 people for a week. Well, there was not 150 all week, but people were camped out there. They do have an airport that they shut down for the week and turned it into a giant campground, and so people could camp there. My family, we ended up just driving up that morning, and we were able to get in just in time. And then trying to get out, the news station from Denver was up there, and they said it was like 6 Broncos games trying to get out at the same time. It took us 11 hours to go a mile. It was pretty nuts, but
I
yeah,
could walk faster than that.
oh, you could. But once we got out, it was fine, because you got right. It was just off the Interstate 15, yeah, 15 or 25, one of those, 25.
All right. Did you have something to add, Ken?
You didn't
All
heckle
right.
me, Ken? I feel bad.
All right. Was there another question from our in-person audience? Anyone? I hear a lot of crickets. All right. So, with that, I want to thank everyone for coming here. This is our last in-person presentation, and I know there has been some Facebook confusion. We will actually continue doing online-only presentations throughout the winter, so please do check us out. So like and subscribe on our YouTube, because every first Saturday of the month, we will still have the What's Up in the Night Sky with Lonnie. And on select, when we get other presenters, we will be able to fill in, I believe, the third Saturday of every month. And if we get a lot of response from our speakers, we might fill in more. Again, you'll be able, if you go onto our website, uacnj.org, you'll be able to see a list of all our proposed winter programs so far. And with that, I want to thank you guys for coming out. And I do have some Halloween candy actually in a bowl on the sales desk. I ain't gonna judge people. I just do the costume because when am I gonna get to dress up? You gotta have a little fun in life. And with that, have a good night.